Recording. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the August 26th Open Infrastructure Labs meeting. I thought we were going to have a speaker this week, but when we double checked with him on Monday, I realized that he was on vacation this week, and he said, while I could do it, my wife would be unhappy with me. So we're going to try and do that next week. And that was a GitOps discussion with Jeremy Stanley from the OpenStack Foundation. They're not specifically using it for an OpenShift or an OpenStack environment. And if we're able to identify folks who have some experience with GitOps doing that, who are available to come and talk, we're going to also try and invite them. But it's sort of more about the cultural part in some ways and the changes to the thinking that need to go on. And I think that it'll be it'll be good for that. Also, a lot of the issues that he was concerned wouldn't be applicable, I think are applicable for us, because we're actually planning to do pretty much everything in Git. So I think his concerns had to do with when you're standing up a cloud, there are probably things that you wouldn't be putting into your Git. But from our perspective, I think we're planning to, because we want them to be highly visible. On CNV, I'm going to ask Lars to do an update, but also I wanted to give a quick update on, we had been planning to have the ability to start sharing it with folks in this community. I misordered or underordered some hardware that we needed to get the Ceph cluster going. I'm in the process of trying to get confirmation that we can get that for this weekend when it'll get installed. And then it'll be a couple of days next week. Are there other things you wanted to say about CNV, Lars?
I don't think I have a whole lot of new and exciting updates. I mean, mostly I've been on vacation since I think we last met.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much in the same state it was. We're doing a little refactoring of some of the playbooks that I've been using to manage some of the infrastructure around that, which I think will be ultimately be interesting. But that's pretty much it.
So Michael, when you're saying you under-ordered some of the hardware and opening it up to access to this community here, first, like what kind of cluster size can we expect there? And B, would it be only for the people on this call to get access to, or for a larger community? So that's two questions.
May I take that one, Michael?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
So this is for the CNV environment that we've been working on, and the hardware in particular is additional disks so that we can add OCS storage to the environment. Because the one thing that's missing right now is some kind of shared storage so that we can do things like VM migrations and persistent volumes that can be moved from server to server. And that's really what we're waiting on before exposing this to kind of a larger group of people beyond, me, basically. And so that is what we're talking about. So the cluster right now has 3 workers. We'll be adding 3 additional nodes to act as the storage servers, and that will be it.
Okay. And a larger group means Lars plus 5 or Lars plus 500?
Probably not 500, possibly more than 5. I mean, it's the point that if people say, I want to try out CNV, that we have something that people can try out CNV on, with the caveat that it's not necessarily meant to be super stable. We were just talking to Idan and other folks about some potential interest in using it for some activities around in Israel. They have a program, I think, with students learning Python and things like that. And that would be an actual, first of all, would be a real workload for it, but would also require stability on the order of months. So we have to decide whether we're ready to, make that commitment for this environment. But that would be the more than 5, but less than 500.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
In the context of this meeting, it was sort of so that people can start touching it and looking at things like what is going on with the monitoring, what is being tracked. So
yes, which we haven't even looked at yet, but
I
yes.
know, but getting this crew to look at it might actually accelerate that, which would be cool. I don't know if anybody from the NERC team is on today. Essentially, the update for them is they've been actively engaged with standing up an OpenStack cluster with help from Red Hat Consulting. I have actually not heard much. I have a meeting later today, I think, with them. Mats or Lars, have you heard anything from them recently?
Not from the NERC. We have a short phase 2 meeting later today on my calendar.
And so that's when I expect we're going to get an update.
Yeah.
We're sort of treating it as no news is good news. So hopefully that will be stood up relatively soon. There is the Project Keras kickoff that's later today. That started out as just a group of researchers getting together to talk about what they were doing and what their goals were. And about a week ago, I think Friday, they thought about it and said, there's really no reason that this shouldn't be more open. So a couple of folks from the CEF team are joining, I believe. A couple of folks from IBM Research and Intel are joining. It's about, at a really high level, it's about moving storage into places on the network that make it closer to the problem set. I actually have a good one-liner, but I forgot to paste it in here that captures what it is. So I may peek at that in a second. And that's going to be recorded, and there'll be notes. And those, thanks to Parthay, who's now taken over getting the videos pushed up, that video will get pushed up as soon as it's available. And if it doesn't for any reason, it's on me because I didn't share it with them quickly enough. There's going to be a separate group. I'm not sure why I keep using the word metering when what I really mean is tracing. For some reason, they're connected in my brain. There's a separate working group that's going to sort of start to spin up around that. And that's driven by a couple of interconnected needs. One is it's coming out of systems research groups. Their big pain point one of their big pain points has been getting traces of large data centers or any data centers that they can use to do systems research. And that when they were describing this, it felt exactly or almost exactly like I was talking to Marcel. And I was like, well, there's actually a group of people who are interested in this, and we should get together and figure out if we can combine forces. Tied to that, we are looking at some work that was done by the Chameleon project, which is similar to the Open Cloud testbed. It's a national testbed for systems researchers. And we're looking at whether we can run that on the MOC initially and make that information available. And some of the folks who are interested that I know of, I've invited Marcel because I assume, Marcel, that you would be interested, or I will be inviting you once we get it scheduled. And we'll be starting by saying, when are you available? There's folks from Intel that are interested because of they view it as both a storage overlap thing and things that they should be doing to improve tracing in their products so that that information can be made available. There's interest from 2 Sigma, which is a mock partner that is in the financial services industry. So I think my sense is that that's going to be a good way to get some acceleration going on this specific area. The only other thing I knew of as a topic, unless others have others, was unless other people have other topics they wanted to talk about, was just talking about what we want to prioritize as our future discussion topics. There's that list of proposed ones from below. There wasn't a lot of feedback saying, hey, this is important to me, except on ACM and HPAC monitoring solutions and OpenStack extensions. But even those were only 1 or 2 people. So if those are the wrong things to list, or if there are other things that people want to make sure we use this time for, I'd like to try and get a discussion or feedback on that.
I just add one thing, I think, really to the one of the earlier topics about monitoring in the cloud. I've been having discussions with an internal Red Hat group that really is part of the support organization. They developed something called Insights, and there's an OpenShift version of Insights that it's not a product, it's not sold, it's an internal tool, but they seem to be very receptive to running it and possibly operating it first in new versions in you know, an open cloud, like the Mass Open Cloud. And that could well play into while Insights is intended to feed information back to Red Hat support, Red Hat support can alert a customer that, hey, you have a disk that's starting to fail, or you know, whatever, you're running at capacity, your memory or whatever. They're not adverse to customers using that information themselves, and also of it feeding into, you know, possibly AI operations and such. So while the code is not like an open source project that people can hack on, the results of that, you know, could be utilized. So they seem to be receptive, and it's not a done deal, but I'm hoping that that will be something we can bring to the table that will help. So.
What topics do people want to use this for? The ones we had proposed were HPC monitoring, the tracing capabilities. Stig offered to present on some similar projects that he's been involved in, and he's been involved in a lot of projects like this in the EU. Advanced cluster management, a presentation on the Keras project, a presentation on Wenju. Wenju is actually about making it easier to bring AI workloads into companies. It sort of stemmed from this observation that I think it was, I'm trying to, numbers I'm about to quote may be inaccurate, but it was something on the order of 80% of AI projects get started and don't ever get deployed. Maybe it was 70%. And so they were trying to figure out, as they looked at that, the researchers sort of said, it feels like it's more of an operational issue than it is a technical issue or a programming issue. And so that's what led to that. And the other thing was there was a proposal, there's a group working within the Red Hat CTO's office on a way to use, I don't, Bill, do you remember the name of the upstream project that it's coming out of? The project that Gagan had wanted to, was wondering whether this group would be interested in hearing about.
Yeah, there's a.
Did it come out of Koku?
I think it's related to that. I'm not sure if that's the exact project.
It's the meter. I think it's the metering operator, and basically, they're trying to take this thing that would allow users in an OpenShift environment to get a better understanding of what their usage patterns were. And I didn't know if there was interest in that or not. So those were sort of the 7 topics that we had come up with. But are there things you guys want to see us delving into? Especially given that in theory next week we'll start to have the CNV. Next week or the week after we'll start to have people able to get out to the CNV to play with what's going on with the monitoring there. Anybody?
Everybody at first. I think it's we need this either the CNV or some other cluster to have something actual, because otherwise it's going to be interesting presentations on interesting topics for sure. If that's the purpose of this group, to talk about interesting stuff in general, I can invite somebody to talk about Argo CD. That's something that we're using internally, not internally, but also soon externally to deploy applications. That's also in the realm of how do I monitor stuff, because there's gating involved, etc.
Right.
Or do we want to have this group focused more around an actual living subject, aka the CNV cluster, and what to do next there? So once we have it running, Lars pointed out that we need to set up monitoring there. So we might talk about whether we repurpose this observability framework. Can't remember what its name was from Live.
Yep.
To work with him to deploy it there, or whether we just get stock Prometheus installed, or whether if it's about tracing, Jaeger is something that's like runs out of the box on top of this OpenShift cluster.
I mean,
Yeah, I think LifeSync is a service telemetry framework, and they have interfaced and worked with the observability team. And I think there's an opportunity there where we might be able to bring them to the table and do some deployments on the CNV setup once we're ready. I'll have to check with Life and Prod and those folks to make sure that they're game for it, but I would love to see that.
Yeah. So Michael, I think this question goes, I would bounce that question to you, like what should be the overarching topic of this meeting? Are we focusing on some concrete implementations, or are we focusing on interesting topics in the monitoring operate first space?
so
Kind of hope we can do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, that's always the the best answer.
I mean, I think that we will have a concrete cluster to play with in short order, and people I mean, the interesting thing, of course, is that when you deploy OCP, it's got Prometheus running on it already, so there is some monitoring there. The more interesting thing from my perspective, honestly, is learning, like figuring out alerting configurations and things like that. It would be interesting to see how things like whatever the service technology framework, whatever it's called these days, how that integrates with, if it integrates with OpenShift, because I know that was originally designed almost exclusively around OpenStack for monitoring, and I don't know whether or not that really has any applicability to what we're doing right now. Obviously, the NERC is a different environment, maybe more interested in that. So I mean, we will have concrete things to look at and get our hands on and work with, I think, in short order, but having interesting discussions on topics related to this, I think, is also a good use of the time.
To answer that question, let me ping Life and Prod and say pose that question about this environment CNV on bare metal OpenShift nodes, and how they would deploy it, how it would work, and would they like to come and show us, so and maybe get it running. That'd be great.
And Bill, the other question maybe to add to that is, if you've got more than one environment, what's the model look like? Do they all feed into the same place? Does that mean multiple instances of the monitoring frameworks? Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I'm
by more than one environment, you mean more than one cluster in
Yes.
in the NAS Open Cloud, or across a wider scope?
I mean, you've got more than one cluster in which you are interested in monitoring.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm happy to forward this question. So basically, we can just deploy STF in this environment and use it. Multi-cloud is a specific topic we are using. So collecting data from multiple OpenStack instances or multiple OpenStack deployments to a single STF deployment.
So, Matthijs,
great.
maybe you could
Okay,
answer the other question there then, which is, does this have any applicability to an OpenShift installation?
We have something like a demo for collecting data from an OpenShift deployment. However, that is not our target audience.
Right.
And, or the other way around, the observability team is the monitoring team for OpenShift.
Right.
We have, for example, a collectd operator, which would deploy collectd on this OpenShift cluster to send that metrics via QDR to STF. So that would work, yes. So it should be pretty straightforward to just deploy STF using this collectd operator and so on your deployment.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we can look at that, I guess. And so right now we have this, is it basically a choice between the observability product and the STF? Like they are currently two different things that you have to choose between largely. Is that accurate?
Let me try and answer from my standpoint, and I'm glad we have Matthias here. He's in the team there. I didn't realize that when I said stuff before. But observability is not a product, and it's not really that close yet. It's really we're testing it in one place type of a thing.
Okay.
And I know that the STF team has gone ahead and done a proof of concept of integrating with it, and so that it can be used. And I believe that the ACM team has been working on like an operator for observability to try and move it from like a pre-production experimental phase into something that they could really utilize. So maybe Matthias, you could clarify that or correct me if I'm wrong.
I cannot add much to this. So basically, observability is not a product yet.
Okay.
So the only thing delivered to customers is STF.
Okay.
And like I said, Life has told me that they have done a proof of concept where just to make it all work together, and so
yes.
And that could be something that could be experimented with in this environment if need be. And that could feed back and be a way of operating first and feed back into improving STF as well as observability and coming up with a good scenario for what we're trying to achieve. So Matthias, do you want to take on that and talk to Life and Prod about possibly bringing this to the CNV on Mass Open Cloud environment, or do you want me to reach out?
I'm happy to take that and talk to them. If you would do as well, that would probably help to free some resources.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to summarize a little back what I heard, although I also captured in the Etherpad. I think, Marcel, you asked a great question. What is it we want this to be? And I think the answer was yes. We want it to be both. But to your point, once we have the CNV available for people to play with, that's going to go a long way, I think, towards enabling more of a doing, which we haven't really been able to do a lot of because we haven't had stuff to poke at. A thing that I wanted to mention is that we're also looking at using the code base that Lars created for CNV to stand up OpenShift in the MOC on a staging platform. And if that goes as we hope it will, that will be our sort of our fast path to getting an updated version of OCP available to MOC users. But it occurs to me that a lot of these sorts of, and by the way, that would be based on, the code base for that would end up living in, at least I'm assuming, we haven't explicitly discussed this completely, but I'm pretty sure that we've all largely agreed that we want that to be a GitOps version that lives on the GitLab location. Tied to that, though, it occurs to me that almost all of the tools we're talking about for the CNV cluster would also be applicable there. And so that might be another place as we move along that we can touch things, and it will probably be a larger use case than the initial CNV cluster. We probably will also be exploring adding CNV there, although we haven't explicitly committed to that yet. That seems like a step 2. So I just sort of wanted to put that out there as yet another opportunity to gather more data. Any other stuff that we should talk about with this group? Then, without objection, please enjoy the extra half an hour of your day.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Cheers.